And our next guest this morning is Mr. Scott Lucas, professor from the Clinton Institute at University College Dublin. Sir, always a pleasure to see you. Thanks for joining us, as always. All right, well, Poland's diplomatic offensive continues. There's no time to rest. The debate certainly continues. Recently, Poland's foreign minister, Radosław Sikorski, told Politico, don't just assume that Trump will back Russia. Now, let's go back a couple of weeks. Mr. Duda visiting Trump. Now, some people accusing Duda of working with cross purposes to the new Polish government. Do you think that that's the case, or is he working towards the same efforts that all of the Polish government is working towards, which is assuring continued assistance for Ukraine?
Well, I think that Poland president's visit to Donald Trump, whatever you think about the domestic, chatter about it, was perhaps one of the most significant developments during Russia's 26-month invasion of Ukraine. The reason why I say that is that President Duda, following an earlier visit by the British Foreign Secretary David Cameron to see Trump, appears to have been significant, perhaps decisive, in getting Trump to remove his objections to that $61 billion U.S. aid package that finally passed Congress last week after a 6.5-month blockade by the Trumpists and by the hard-right Republicans. We don't know what Duda said to Trump, but we do know, from a series of diplomats, a series of other statesmen, that Trump always responds to being flattered. Trump always responds to the personal appeal. He likes to feel like he's the big guy in the room. And I would imagine that President Duda said to Mr. Trump, look, Poland really likes you. Poland really liked you when you were president. We considered naming a U.S. base, Fort Trump, after you. You can be the really important person here by recognizing that Russia not only threatens Ukraine, but it threatens Poland and other countries. So you need to back off. Not back off. You need to say that you will support this American aid to Ukraine. And within hours, Trump went on social media and tweeted, indeed, that Ukraine's sovereignty must be respected. And he used that word support for Ukraine. It perhaps wasn't the decisive factor in lifting the blockade against the American aid to Ukraine, but it certainly helped.
Right, and now perhaps let's bring Europe also to the table, as now I believe it is safe to say that Poland faces a delicate balancing act. On one hand, it seeks to maintain strong ties with the United States, especially given the potential return of Donald Trump to the White House. Now, on the other, it must navigate also the differing narratives between all Europe, namely speaking about France and Germany, and the US, particularly, for instance, during the Trump era. So how do you think that Poland can successfully maneuver between these competing interests, or are they really competing interests, do you think?
For the moment, we're all on the same side. That's the key development with the U.S. finally passing the aid package. And that is the Biden administration, which worked for months to overcome the Trumpists and the Republicans, or some of the Republicans, because, of course, many Republicans in the end voted to provide the aid. The Biden administration is alongside the European Union, individual European nations, and Poland in saying this is a vital moment to defend Ukraine. We know, as Ukrainian officials have repeated in the last 24 hours, that Ukraine is in a very difficult but not critical or catastrophic situation. And that's because of the Russian aerial and ground assaults in the east of the country. It's because of the Russian advantage 7-1, say up to 10-1 in artillery shells, and the Russian use of glide bombs, and the Russian missile and drone attacks. And you need to provide the air defense to Ukraine. You need to provide eventually the significant warplanes to Ukraine. And you need now to provide the munitions to Ukraine. And the key players here, the US, Poland, the rest of Europe, we've got that window until the American elections in November to try to make sure that this resistance against Russia is supported, even as Vladimir Putin desperately tries to break the Ukrainian will to fight.
That's right. And also another interesting statement made by Radosław Sikorski, Poland's foreign minister. He said, there was a conference in Berlin about rebuilding Ukraine after the war. Well, how about preventing it from being destroyed? So I think that would be better. Quote. Who do you think he was speaking to when he was saying that?
Well, he's speaking to the Polish public because you have to maintain Poland's support for this. This is a marathon, not a sprint. He's speaking to other countries in Europe, in most countries in Europe. And let's be very clear here, the European Union has stepped up in recent months to an unprecedented level in providing EU assistance for Ukraine, that this has to be maintained. And of course, he's speaking back to countries outside of Europe, including the Americans. We know, and it is important to discuss the funding for Ukraine's reconstruction after the Russian invasion is defeated. But you cannot have that reconstruction if the country collapses in the face of the Russian onslaught. And day on day, there are activists, not just inside Russia, there are activists in Europe, there are activists in the United States, in other countries that put out the Kremlin's message, which is it's a waste of money to support Ukraine. Concentrate on your own countries. It's all a NATO plot. Why are you supporting it? And Foreign Minister Sikorski realizes this is as much an information, an understanding war, as it is a war on the battlefield or an economic conflict.
You're absolutely right, because we are facing a war of disinformation, which is as powerful as the war on the front lines. And now the war of disinformation affects half of the world, and especially Europe as such. And I believe that Poland, and being aligned now with other eastern flank, NATO eastern flank countries, realize that more than any other. So now perhaps taking a closer look at Polish politics in the context of Ukraine. Do you think that Poland can establish now a joint diplomatic strategy that aligns, for instance, now President Duda's vision and with what now Radosław Sikorski, now the foreign minister, also advocates for? Do you think that now, because the combined efforts could shape now Poland's approach to global affairs, do you think, how do we combine this? How do we navigate this?
Well, I think what you're seeing Poland do, in terms of the diplomatic effort and in terms of the military effort, especially as other countries, let's be honest, in Eastern Europe have leaders who are very sympathetic to the Kremlin. I'm thinking of Hungary and Slovakia. I think Poland is maintaining that united front. I think in the context of recent events in Poland, it's very important, and I think the leaders, are reflecting this, that you don't allow domestic tensions or domestic disagreements get in the way of that united front. When it comes to foreign policy, talking not just about President Duda, Foreign Minister Sikorski, but Prime Minister Tusk. And that is, look, we know that Poland had significant elections a few months ago. We know that the current government has a different vision from its predecessor. We know that you face very vital economic, social, and cultural issues. And it's okay to disagree over that. It's okay to say, well, we need to have dialogue about the best way forward. What you can't, in my opinion, respectfully, let happen is let those disagreements on what should be Poland's way forward domestically get in the way of that united fight to support Ukraine against the Russian invasion.
That's right. And just a final question, just in terms of Poland's relationship with the United States, should Trump take office in November? I mean, I know that Trump and the previous government, PiS, they got along pretty well. How do you see Trump getting along with this new government in Poland?
It depends not only on Trump, it depends on the new U.S. Congress. And I need to emphasize that because the fight for control of Congress between the Republicans and Democrats is a toss-up right now. It's on a knife edge. So you could well have Donald Trump in the White House. You could well have a Democratic-led Congress in at least one or possibly both of the two chambers. And so I think not just for Poland, but for Poland's allies in Europe and beyond, you have to continue to try to play up to Trump. You have to continue to flatter him. You have to have this transactional relationship where you let him think it benefits his ego to support Ukraine. And at the same time, you've got to work with those congressmen, the Democrats and some of the Republicans, the sensible Republicans, to make sure that Trump doesn't, as he did in 2019, blackmail Ukraine, allowing his friend Vladimir Putin, and he does consider Putin a friend, to take advantage.
And having in mind what you just said, it is clear now that Poland does need to employ some strategies so that the US would recognize its critical role that it plays in now maintaining the security in Central and Eastern Europe. Professor, thank you so much for joining us today.
Always a pleasure,
Thanks
sir.
to you and all your viewers.
Thanks very
Thank
much.
you both.